Hello, everybody out there. Welcome to another episode of the Alex Cuesta Daily Show. How is everyone out there? I hope we all had a good weekend. I know I did. As always, I want to thank everybody for taking some time to stopping here, listening to me. Hopefully you enjoy what I do. And on that note, if you do enjoy it, please give us a like, share, follow, subscribe wherever you are, however you listen to the podcast, and also rate it 5 stars over on Apple or anywhere you can give it a high rating. Only helps to boost us up, bring us up when suggestions are there so we can get more love, get more listeners. I always appreciate that. And also word of mouth. Again, you like what I do here, that's the best way to help us out is word of mouth, get this going. So today might be a little bit of a longer day, a little bit longer than normal because I want to talk about something that I think is important for all of us to kind of get informed about. Because if you don't know about this, it's going to be something that's going to take you by surprise when you do your taxes and also may end up affecting us for the rest of our existence here. It's that big. It is an existential thing, and it could end up being a crisis if we don't kind of nip this in the bud now. So last week, I did the episode, I think it was on Thursday. I didn't do it on Friday, but I did the episode on how the FBI dropped the ball during the Congregation Beth Israel Synagogue hostage situation where an Islamist terrorist took 4 people hostage, yelling about trying to get out another terrorist, Lady Al-Qaeda. The FBI called it not anti-Semitic, essentially, and it ended up being proven that this guy is very anti-Semitic. He is an Islamist terrorist. He does hate Jewish people. And it was just another way of the FBI misstepping. On that day, I also mentioned that there was another article that caught my attention. It was from zerohedge.com, and it was written by Tyler Durden. And if people don't know who that is one of the main characters from Fight Club. And that's one of the reasons I didn't run with it. Zero Hedge is known to be more of a right-leaning publication. And it was IRS to require facial recognition to view tax returns. Now, I'm not saying anything against Zero Hedge. I've never heard of it before this, so I don't know what their reputation is. I Googled it a little bit. Of course, Google's going to say, oh, they're right-wing, so, can't be trusted. But, the information in there had about the ID Me stuff, which I personally went through when I was filing for my unemployment here in New York State. So it seemed believable enough, but it wasn't something I wanted to run with at the time, and maybe not at all. But I looked around, and that was on the 20th, last Thursday I read this. So I looked around and I was looking through articles, and what popped up is a CBS News article written by Irina Ivanova. And it says IRS will require taxpayers to sign up with ID Me to access their online accounts. So the poppers popped up, the lights popped up on that one. I was like, this is interesting because now you have a major news source, and this was written today, earlier this morning. So now I have a major news source talking about this. So ironically enough, as I'm scrolling through, I use Twitter a lot to try and find articles because I follow every single person under the sun, politically, sports-wise, everything on this account, the Alex Cuesta Show account. So I like to get a nice varied view. I search around on all the web news websites just so I can read. I read a lot all friggin' day. It gives me up a lot of good information. The wife isn't too happy all the time, but came across this, and then I stumbled across more. There was a Bloomberg article written on Thursday, the 20th, and it says, how did ID Me get between you and your identity? This is the article I'm going to be featuring today, and it is pretty long. It's a long form article. It's an extensive read, and it's an engaging read, but it is well worth the read. And my issue is with all 4 of these articles, they all missed the point. So, and I mentioned the 4th article was from Mike.com. I don't know anything about Mike.com. The writer here is Vanessa Taylor, and Mike.com was on board. The IRS has made tax season even worse somehow. One thing I got out of it from all this, when you read the article from Mike.com, their biggest issue towards the end is that it could be discriminatory versus transgenders. It does seem like it will be with the facial recognition, and they pounded on that a few times. So that was them. So obviously they're more on the left-leaning LGBTQ plus Y, X, Y, Z, KI, whatever the hell they are now today, whatever that is. They're on that side. So they're on the activist left, more of the Marxist activist left. But then you look, and Zero Hedge is widely considered right wing. And then CBS, no one's going to confuse them for right wing. They are very far left. Maybe not as far as Mike, but they are activists. And then you have Bloomberg, which kind of floats. The publication was more a little right. Michael Bloomberg has ended up being an insane environmentalist, globalist, leftist who's a billionaire, which is way too much goddamn time on his hands. But he still runs Bloomberg Business. So, it's I guess it's middling. I don't think it reflects his ideas as much. So I don't know who it is. But this article here was co-written by Shawn Donnan and Dina Bass. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. But so that's the article I want to go with. The other articles were a little bit shorter. This one's very in depth, and I found it very interesting. And again, they all missed the point. So this is the one we're going to jump into. I want to get into it right away. Again, How Did ID Me Get Between You and Your Identity by Shawn Donnan, and I'm going to go Dina. I like Dina. Dina Bass. If I'm wrong, very sorry. So let's get going. If you were writing a techno thriller, you'd give a hero a backstory like Blake Hall's. He's a Harvard MBA, an alumnus of McKinsey & Company's ultra-competitive summer associate program, and comes from a family with a proud military tradition. He's a decorated Army Ranger who saw action in Iraq. His dad was an Army Brigade commander. His grandfather fought off a Nazi assault in World War II. Now he's the co-founder of a cybersecurity company who peppers his conversations with battlefield jargon, offering his mea culpas with pledges to do push-ups as self-inflicted punishment. Quote, I feel a moral duty because I still had the DNA of a soldier, unquote, Hall said in an October interview. So right away, you see that this guy, Blake Hall, one of the co-founders, is a military guy, extremely intelligent with the Harvard MBA, McKinsey & Co. summer associate program. An intelligent dude, no doubt. Let's continue. So this past June, when he very publicly claimed that his company ID.me, a player in the blooming online identity verification business, had uncovered one of the biggest heists in U.S. history, a $400 billion theft of pandemic unemployment payments perpetuated by cybercriminal gangs. It came with a certain veneer of credibility. Keyword there being veneer. $400 billion in debt and fraud is insane. Just think about that number. That's more GDP. That's a bigger GDP than most countries on the planet. Continuing. Within minutes of Axios publishing the interview with Hall, the $400 billion figure went viral. It generated news stories of a nefarious dark web inhibited with Nigerian criminal syndicates out to massively defraud the U.S. government. It was seized on by think tanks on both the left and right that are trying to reimagine the delivery of government benefits. It caused a nervous shifting in seats among officials at the U.S. Department of Labor and state agencies overwhelmed by an unprecedented volume of unemployment claims. Republicans latched onto it as an example of obscene government waste. Quote, the greatest theft of American tax dollars in history has risen unabated to $400 billion, with nearly half of all pandemic unemployment spending lost to fraud by criminals, end quote, declared Kevin Brady, a top Republican on the House Ways and Means Committee. It was an almost unimaginable amount, a sum larger than the combined annual budgets of the U.S. Army and Navy, and 5 times what the federal government collects annually in taxes to fund the unemployment system. So there we go. Right there you see, this was a smart play by Mr. Hall. $400 billion is a scare tactic. I know it seems like pennies now when we're talking about $2.1 trillion, $5 trillion spending bills that, thank God, were mostly shot down except for that awful infrastructure bill, but still, it's a lot of money. Let's continue. It's also a number that, with the benefit of time, data, and a little interrogation, looks increasingly hyperbolic. Could have told you that. Hall's key allegation was that half the money the government paid out, more than $800 billion by then, had been stolen by fraudsters. But the state's own accounting doesn't back that up. In December, California, by far the largest state payee of benefits, said it had identified $20 billion in fraudulent unemployment payments during the pandemic, 11% of what it paid out overall. California was responsible for a quarter of all pandemic unemployment payments in the United States. If its fraud experience held nationally over the past 2 years, it would translate to roughly $95 billion. That's a big sum, but still only a quarter of what Hall was estimating. And other states like Ohio and Texas have reportedly lower levels of fraudulent payments than California. But Hall's $400 billion figure set 2 things in motion. It fed a fear of criminal activity, some of it legitimate, that caused states to impose new checks and flag often innocent claims of fraudulent, freezing payments for weeks and sometimes months to legions of people in dire need of help in the middle of an epical crisis. It also helped solidify ID.me's move from little-known, decade-old company with few niche government contracts into a swaggering industry leader now valued at $1.5 billion with ambitions to be America's digital gatekeeper. Now, if that last sentence doesn't scare the friggin' hell out of you, I don't know what will. America's digital gatekeeper. This is while this country is on the precipice of jumping into the metaverse. This is while this country is on the precipice of Elon Musk testing brain chips. And we now have a private company working with governments that wants to be a digital gatekeeper. Let's continue. Hall is emphatic to this day that the $400 billion estimate is accurate. It is, he says, confirmed in patterns and data that the company has gathered through its work for the labor departments of California, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, Texas, and 22 other states. If state agencies are reporting far lower levels of fraud publicly, well, they're wrong. Quote, the data we have is very clear. This is the largest cyber attack in terms of fraud in American history, unquote. Hall wrote in an October email to Bloomberg Businessweek, one in a series that he and spokesperson for ID.me sent over weeks offering circumstantial evidence to back up their math. Quote, just like a recon platoon leader on the battlefield, our duty is to report truthfully what we see. If people react negatively to the truth, well, that's on them, end quote. Now, can I just say, a guy like this that constantly uses jargon back from his military days, doesn't he seem like a bad, parody character out of a movie? Just like in the recon platoon leader in the battlefield, all duty is to report truthfully what we see. People react negatively to the truth, well, that's on them. He's just like that commander or drill sergeant that never got out of the military and treats it I know they exist, but it seems like a little bit of an act going on that this guy's doing. And also, it really should be scaring everybody that these governments are jumping on with this company to ID us. It's a private company, but it is working very close with the public sector. I will get back to that. But also, when he's saying the data is very clear, largest cyber attack in history, they're wrong if they don't have their data clear. I mean, it's a little sketchy. It is a little sketchy. Let's keep going. For Hall, the number has to be accurate because his company's ambitions are riding on it. He wants ID.me to control what he calls the identity layer of the internet, which would make it equivalent of a digital bouncer, albeit one whose software doesn't always work. Quote, our goal is to be everywhere you want to be in the future, end quote, he says. This fucking guy is scary. We flipped out when Mark Zuckerberg said this type of shit. We didn't like Jack Dorsey. Well, Americans need to know more about this guy because we don't like this type of stuff. We don't like dudes like this who are megalomaniacs. That's all this guy seems like. He's a megalomaniac. This doesn't seem like he's trying to be there to help anybody but himself. Our goal is to be everywhere you want to be in the future. That's like by and large in Wall-E. That's like all these giant corporations that we see as evil. This guy's trying to be that guy. He's trying to be the one that says yay or nay, what you can and what you can't do. And I also have to point out that I didn't read much about this $400 billion fraud number. I like politics a lot. I will say that. If this was more of a legit thing, do you not think that either side, whether it happened under Trump or it happened under Biden, would be flipping out until this day, ringing the bells on that happened? If that was true, if our government thought it had any inkling of truth, any of them in there, it wouldn't just be one dude on the House Ways and Means Committee, because that wouldn't just be the only one rounding that out and yelling that out. If this had any inkling of truth, it would be investigation upon investigation, and it would have been huge, whether if it was Republicans touting about it, and you would have all the Republican news sites going insane. You would have Bongino Report running a ton of things on it. The Blaze, all their shows on The Blaze talking about it, bringing it up all the time. You would have Daily Wire doing it, Fox News doing it, OAN, America First. I can go on. And again, on the left, if this was something that happened under Trump, why didn't Joe Biden talk about this on the campaign or any of the Democratic candidates talk about this on the campaign. This would be the biggest talking point. This would be it. Why isn't anybody bringing this up? Because that's what it would be laid upon the feet. If Trump did it, CNBC, all of these other companies, CNN, HuffPost, it doesn't matter. Pick your mainstream corporate media. They would be laying this on the feet of Donald Trump and undoubtedly claiming that fraud was somehow happened that circulated by Trump to get in the hands of Russia because he's a puppet of Russia, and somehow he gave them $400 billion because he's Putin's little actor. That's exactly what you would have been hearing. So it's a little bit sketchy to me that his claim of $400 billion in fraud is not something that is widely criticized by one side or the other, depending on who the president was, because they don't give a shit about egg on your face. They don't care about that. They don't care about this or that. That would be government functionality as a total failing. All they would care about is who's in office, who can benefit from it. So that is sketchy to me. Let's continue because this is long. For most people, creating an i.me account is a hassle-free process. ID.me combines data from the phone you're using, selfies you're asked to send, and scans of government documents to verify you are who you say you are. Once you've done that, goes Hall's pitch, you'll be able to do everything online from banking to accessing your health records and checking into a local hotel room without constantly being asked for your credentials or passwords. It's a process that millions of Americans are poised to become familiar with this tax filing season. Eventually, every U.S. citizen could be armed with an ID.me digital passport. We've all been so worried about vaccine passports. And look what the government is teaming up with a private company to do. Don't get this twisted, everybody. Don't let anyone sit there and tell you that this is a public sector versus private sector thing, which we're going to see towards the end of this article. Some people try to make that up, and I'll tell you why they're fucking full of shit. But this is government teaming up with a private company to create digital passports where they have your identity, they have your pictures, they have your government documents all in one place. They'll have your health records. They'll have where you've been, what you do, what you enjoy, who you enjoy it with, all in one little neat place. Again, people are saying, well, you walk around with your phone all the time. They can hear that. They can track that. No shit. No shit they can. But it's not on one neatly designed app where they can file away and see exactly what they want to see. This is being pushed under because states are working with it. 27 states out of 50 are already working with this company. This is being slid under the rug because states are working with it individually. Now it's come to the IRS. That is a federal government institution. It is in the federal government now, but in a sneaky way. The Biden administration did not want to make it seem like they are trying to create a passport. They're all saying, no, we're not going to do vaccine passports. We're not doing vax passports. And because they've seen how long that has gone. Britain pushed against it. Canada, they're subservient, but they're trying to push against it. Every place that a vaccine passport has been introduced has been pushed against, very big rallies, hasn't been popular. What are they doing here? They're going around, they're using a private company, teaming up with state governments, now the Fed government, to make a passport for us to live our daily lives and us to do what we need to do. This is part of the Great Reset. This is part of ESG, environmental, social, environmental, social, corporate governance scores. This is it. This is where you'll have your score. This is the China social credit system right here rolled into this. This is not good, everybody. This is really, really bad. And we need to see this. And where are they starting it for the federal government? Where are they introducing this in the federal government? To your money that you're sitting there, and tax season is a way for us to beg for some of our freaking money back. That's all it is. So where are they using this? For you to get your money back, for you to see your past scans, for you to get your child tax credit if you want it or not. This is where they're introducing it because they know all Americans are going to need access to this. So whether we like it or not, we're going to eventually have to have an ID.me account. I have one already. I didn't like it then. I bitched about it then. I don't like it now. I like it even worse now. This is quite literally them creating a vaccine passport without saying it. This is a passport for your life. And everyone's going to know it, and it's all going to be on our goddamn smartphones. It's going to be in a little neat app, and we're going to have no choice but to show it. The next paragraph is fucking terrifying. Let's continue. Hall's vision has attracted $27.5 million in investments from the likes of Alphabet Inc., Morgan Stanley, and former U.S. Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker. Let me stop real quick. Alphabet Inc. owns Google, YouTube, all that. Morgan Stanley, gigantic. Former U.S. Secretary of Commerce. Let's just think here, who are the players now investing? You don't think that Alphabet can not turn around and buy this company? And now one of our worst nightmares that everyone, I think, is really wary of, one of the biggest corporations on the planet is going to have access to all of our information, whether we want health records, all this type of shit. We give it up willingly like idiots to Facebook all the time when we're making our profiles, when we're doing all their dumb little games that they do. All you idiots are giving up a ton. But if it gets in the hands of Google, it's quote unquote just a search engine or just an email provider, which they scroll through our emails if they want to sometimes. But all that, if they get that, there's a huge company with all this access to shit that they're not supposed to have. Let's continue with the article. It's won votes of confidence not only from the 27 states that have hired ID.me during the pandemic, but also from the U.S. Department of Labor, which last year awarded it $1 billion to modernize state computer systems. The IRS, too, used ID.me to help people register for monthly child tax credit payments introduced last July. So again, here it is. It's in the government now. And I know people are going to say, listen, the government has contractors all the time come in. They have defense contractors do this stuff, but it's not this close and it's not dealing with all of our personal information like this thing is. That's the difference. This has a real control of our life, and it is partnering with the government. People, I'm going to say it right now, this is a fascistic thing. Public-private partnerships is the goal and the branch of fascism. It is a socialist type of thing where the state becomes everything, disguised under private partnerships. Whenever you hear public-private partnership, that is fascism. Pure and simple. The Nazis did it with Volkswagen. And it's well known that Volkswagen was a puppet of the Nazi party. But they were Volkswagen. They were a private company. They made cars. Yeah, they were a government company. They made cars for the government. Big deal. They were the government. It's the same way China. Every company in China right now is a part of the state. You don't have a company unless you're part of the state. That is fascism. They have a pseudo free market in there that the government controls, but it is all fascism. And that is what is happening here. And the fact that these big companies are teaming on in, they're joining in with the fray. Let's continue the article. But the company's tightening national grip also raises no shortage of troubling questions, starting with, should we be entrusting private companies with the responsibility that would naturally fall on governments, such as verifying the identities of their own citizens? Just as we probably don't want Amazon or Facebook controlling access to our tax records or a government lifeline when things go wrong, it isn't clear we should want ID.me to be everywhere we want to be. I agree with that. We don't want them to be anywhere. We don't want Amazon and Facebook having our stuff, even though we're stupid enough to give it to them all the time. They have our credit cards. Amazon has all of our credit cards. If you have a Prime account, you give them your credit card information to buy things. But that question, should we be entrusting private companies with the responsibility to naturally fall on governments, such as verifying the identities of their own citizens? No, we never should. Unless we want to give that up. It shouldn't be so we can, if we want to give our information up to a private entity, that is our problem, but it shouldn't be given to a private entity in order to gain access to governmental shit. That's what's wrong here. ID.me began 12 years ago as TroopSwap, a Craigslist knockoff for military community. Hall and his business partner, a fellow soldier turned MBA student named Matt Thompson, later turned into more of a Groupon-style discount service. Then they realized that the real asset of TroopSwap was the software, which allowed veterans to prove their eligibility without presenting documents bearing social security numbers or other sensitive personal information. Hall says that ex-military people often had to show those papers not only to get access to Department of Veterans Affairs backed mortgages or healthcare benefits, but also, quote, to get a free Bloomin' Onion at Outback Steakhouse on Veterans Day. It is not a good trade to show your social to a stranger to get a free fried onion, end quote. I'm sorry. I've never seen that happen. Any of my military friends, if you listen to this, please let me know. I have some military friends. Their military ID cards plus their identification, 95% of the time, pretty good. Especially at Outback. That waitress don't give a shit. I've never seen them have to whip out their social. Maybe for the mortgage, which I'm sorry, motherfucker, you don't get a difference. I had to show my social to get a mortgage. That comes from the Department of Veterans Affairs. What's the difference? Or healthcare benefits? Yes, I need to put my social security number on all of those forms. I respect our veterans, but you shouldn't get any special treatment in that way. Hell no. You should have to give that up too. We all do. So that is a moot point. That's not a reason to couple all your information into one app. Let's continue. In 2012, Hall and Thompson, neither of whom had tech backgrounds, saw an opportunity. The Obama administration had announced a national strategy for trusted identities in cyberspace, a push to get private sector companies to develop ID verification technologies. The Troop Swap team bought the ID.me domain, rebranded, and won a $2.6 million grant from the Commerce Department National Institute of Standards and Technology. So let's just link back to the Obama administration there. That is the start of the attempt of a public-private partnership right there. It was a government initiative from the beginning, from the federal government. This was the beginning. And don't say, oh, you're accusing them of being fascist or right or fascist. Blah, 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 blah. They knew what they were doing. They still know what they're doing because Obama is still heavily involved in this Biden administration. If you don't think so, you're a fucking idiot. But they know what they're doing. They knew what they were doing. It's a thing. Let's keep going. By 2016, Hall was using that seal of approval to win government contracts, including one to verify identities for veteran affairs. Thompson says Hall was also pushing ahead with an affiliate marketing strategy, offering deals to people whose identities ID.me had verified. Ultimately, the key reason Thompson says he left the company in 2015, quote, "You shouldn't be targeted for marketing because now I know you're military, so I can market military deals," end quote, says Thompson, now an executive who oversees public sector business at Socure, a competing identity verification and fraud detection company. In parentheses, Hall disputes Thompson's characterization of his department. He also says that ID.me users have to opt into any marketing, which accounts for about 10% of the company's revenue, and that no third party gets access to the user data, end parentheses. I don't believe that last part. No third party gets access. I don't believe that last part. I think that's straight up bullshit. And then because they do it, and then when it happens and it gets broken out, oh, we were hacked. I don't believe any of that. Continuing. ID.me's big break came in 2020 when the pandemic triggered a tsunami of job losses, just as government offices that handle unemployment claims went totally remote. As states scrambled to upgrade online processes for doling out expanded unemployment relief, they were besieged by fraudsters. That June, the company struck its first deal with the state agency, doing identity verification for Florida's unemployment office, which set off a hiring binge by ID.me to keep up with the demand. The company, headquartered in the Virginia suburbs of Washington, opened its first satellite office in Tampa, which would eventually house about 500 employees. Over the next 13 months, ID.me closed deals with 26 other states. So they jumped on the opportunity of a pandemic. And if you pay attention to the Great Reset, this is exactly what they were talking about. They've said on the record, Biden has said on the record, that this is a chance to reshape the economy in the way that we do things. This is all part of the plan. I don't know if Mr. Hall is in on the plan or if he's just a good, a useful idiot that is going to help go along with this. But here it is. They are trying to redo the way the economy works and the way we do business. Everyone went remote. We needed to do more, a different way of identifying people because nobody's in office and nobody can come into the offices anymore. And now we're going to start to hear how beautiful things are because we can work remote. No one has to go in. No one can get sick if you can't go into offices. So here we go. Start giving up your information online to a third party that works with our government. Great. This is going swimmingly. Continuing. When the software is working the way it's supposed to, users are able within minutes to create a profile that will allow them to apply for unemployment benefits or set up an online account with the IRS. When it isn't working, though, things get Kafkaesque. An algorithm asks you to prove who you are. Only you can't because the software decides you don't look like the picture you'd taken years ago at the DMV, or it can't understand why you've changed addresses since, or why you're using your daughter's iPhone. which in turn means your access to unemployment benefits, your tax information, or even your healthcare records, if you're a veteran, can be frozen. I went through this when I had to do ID.me. I changed my address. I have it written on the back like you're supposed to in New York, but it didn't recognize that address from one part and the fixture. And then I eventually had to be taken to a quote unquote trusted referee. They'll talk about that. Quote here, continuing. It's just like opening the door that's there, but when you open it up, it's all bricked up behind it. Is how Annette Wright Warmington describes being trapped in ID.me's identity purgatory. The 65-year-old healthcare administrator tried to register on the app in the spring of 2021 so she could receive benefits she'd applied for in Pennsylvania after losing her job. She found herself staring into her phone, watching an animated crimson waterfall run down its screen every time she tried to take the selfie ID.me asked for. Every 3 failed attempts, the software would lock her out for 72 hours. That went on for weeks. Eventually, she gave up and got in touch with a lawyer at Philadelphia Legal Assistance, who, after multiple tries, was finally able to arrange a video call with one of ID.me's trusted referees, the company's name for its customer support personnel, who finally sorted out the problems. Quote, getting through to a trusted referee is like winning the lottery for our clients, end quote, says Julia Simon Michel, an attorney in charge of Philadelphia Legal Assistance's Unemployment Compensation Unit, which saw complaints tick up after the state's Department of Labor and Industry signed a contract with the company in September 2020. Simon Michel says it sometimes took weeks for her staff to help secure video appointments with ID.me. There has to be a better way, she says. I say from my personal experience, I had to do that. It happened within 20 minutes for me. Not going to lie, it was quick. That was quick, and that was attempting to get my unemployment insurance in the state of New York. Maybe they were one of the later ones and it worked out kinks by then, but it was not that long. It was annoying as shit, and no one should have to do it, but it wasn't that long. Maybe I can imagine people have different experiences. Let's continue. Those most likely to face these problems also tend to be the most vulnerable. Simon Michel and other lawyers and activists around the country say ID.me's process disadvantages those who have poor internet service at home, rely on computers in public libraries, or use old phones. Then there are people who are forced to relocate when they lose a job and can't update their driver's license quickly enough, or users who don't speak English or just struggle with simple digital tasks such as uploading a document. Facial recognition software notoriously performs poorly on people with darker skin, misidentifying Black women as men or getting tripped up if a Black woman changes her hairstyle, says Nicole Turner-Lee, director of the Center for Technology Innovation at the Brookings Institution. Anecdotally, at least, ID.me has faced versions of this problem. It uses facial recognition to verify that photos on user-submitted identifying documents, such as a driver's license, match a selfie taken via the app. Hall says the company isn't running images through a pre-existing database the way law enforcement does, in that it selects facial recognition vendors that comply with federal standards, though he wouldn't name them. The company also says ID.me put its facial recognition software through 2 separate tests for racial bias in 2021 and found no evidence of discrimination. But Claire Garvey, senior associate at the Center on Privacy and Technology at Georgetown University's Law School, says an internal company review without public transparency doesn't prove much. Quote, they didn't show their work, she says. They haven't submitted their test to any sort of publication, which I agree. You don't take these companies on their face, especially companies that are trying to win favor and continue to win contracts. You don't take any company's word on its face, which is why it's fucking insane that we've been taking Moderna and Pfizer CEOs' advice on whether or not we should take their vaccines. Stupid idiots that believe that. Don't listen to CEOs about their own products. Rule number 1, be skeptical when CEOs talk up their own shit, because that's their job. Let's continue. Problems with ID.me's verification system hasn't been limited to Pennsylvania. A log of complaints for California's Employment Developmental Department, which signed up with ID.me in September 2020, details issues ranging from transgender person being blocked from accessing benefits because the gender on their driver's license didn't match their passport to an applicant who went through the ID.me's verification process only to find that their claim still on hold 6 weeks later. Now, I'm sorry, with the transgender one, upgrade your shit. If you turn from Phil to Sally, go get everything upgraded. You live in California. I guarantee they're not going to say, well, you were born Phil, you got to stay Phil. They're going to go, no, we respect your right to be Sally. And if you want to come back next week and be Phil, by golly, you do it and we'll upgrade it. Just pay the fee. So I don't feel any sympathy for that. That's a stupid fucking reason to just not go upgrade your stuff. I know it's a pain in the ass, but go upgrade your shit. Let's continue. In a January 2021 letter to the EDD, which is the Employment Developmental Department, California State Senator Anthony Portantino, cool name, complained that his staff had been inundated with urgent pleas from constituents whose benefits were on hold as a result of problems with ID.me. Quote, this recent purge has put thousands of legitimate claims in limbo with no instructions for how to get out of ID verification jail, Portantino wrote, which I agree with this. I had no idea that New York State went to ID.me. I'm in construction. We do unemployment all the time because good season, bad season, it's a cycle. I've done this before. This just rolled out this past year for New York State, obviously. I had no idea what this was, and I was cursing it off the whole time. And my wife was like, just calm down and do it. But I was like, this is fucking stupid. Why do I have to do this? I'm already in the system. I've already received unemployment, insurance from them before. Why do I have to do this? It is annoying. And I can understand how it's screwing up a ton of people. Let's continue. Hall says the company has since added staff and brought down customer service wait times to a matter of minutes, but he largely dismisses criticisms like these as relatively minor, chalking up many of the issues to agitating state IT systems. The company says it's identified 11,000 false positives, people it unfairly flagged for fraud, in the 27 states it works in, just a fraction of the millions of false claims its system intercepted. In one interview last summer, he linked ID.me's role in assisting employment offices and any challenges his company has faced to the experiences of other overwhelmed institutions. Quote, the media wouldn't go to an overridden ICU and blame that ICU wing for being overrun, end quote. He says, the pandemic and the strain that it put on the system is the root cause of all this. Unlike ID.me, hospitals generally aren't marketing themselves to solution to a surge. I agree with that. They are marketing themselves. ID.me is saying that we're going to make this easier. And if they're not making this easier, then what the hell were they even doing there? And again, stop taking this guy at his word. Don't take CEOs at their word. They're all trying to sell their product. There's no such thing as an honest CEO. And if there is, then they're not a CEO anymore most of the time. Let's continue here. When Hall dropped the $400 billion fraud bomb last summer, very few people publicly pushed back. State labor officials around the country remained overwhelmed with a backlog of claims and what was a very real surge in attempted fraud. Politics played a role, with governors in Republican-led states pulling out of emergency federal programs that they complained were too generous and kept people from going back to work. Massive and rampant fraud fit the partisan narrative that the pandemic unemployment benefits themselves amounted to an irresponsible waste of taxpayer funds. Now, I'm going to stop here. Part of what they say is true. And it's anecdotal everywhere. Everyone sees it. If there's enough anecdotal evidence, usually there's a reason for it. A lot of the financial shit was keeping people from going back to work. Still is keeping people. Now on January 24, 2022, keeping people from going back to work because somehow they ended up even hoarding the money they had, saving it, or just said it's not goddamn worth it. So yes, that was right. I don't know how much with the partisan narrative because again, I didn't hear much about this and I like politics. I listen to it all the time. I'm a C-SPAN guy. I was pissed that YouTube TV didn't have it. Now I have to watch it on YouTube all the time. I didn't hear much about this. I've heard it, but I didn't hear it like the bells and whistles that it should have been rung if it was legit or if the government actually thought it was legit. Again, either side would use this against each other's president without a doubt. Let's continue. The publicly available data on any of this is strikingly sparse. The U.S. Department of Labor says it still doesn't have a precise accounting of what was lost to fraud nationally. The closest thing available is the White House Office of Management and Budget Report, which at the end of December found that improper payments, including those caused by bureaucratic and other errors, represented 18.7% of unemployment payments that went out from July 2020 to June 2021. Yeah, everyone wanting transparency from any government, especially this administration, it ain't happening. Stop looking for it. Let's keep going. Keep bearing with me. It's a long article, but I think it's really important that we continue to hear this because there's a lot in here. And again, it really is missing the point in a lot of things, but it's right on a lot. Let's keep going. State agencies are also loath to share data about fraud or ID.me's performance. In Pennsylvania, officials have declined to release any detailed data showing how ID.me delivered on its contract. In a letter from fighting a business in a letter fighting a Business Week request for information, ID.me's general counsel, Michelle Gruffam, argued that transparency risks, quote, allowing the fraud data to fall into the hands of large criminal organizations, end quote. So here we go. Here we go. Public-private partnership. We don't have to tell you anything. The government does not have to tell you anything about what we hired our third party to do. You as a person, as a individual, does not have the right to find out how your money is being spent on a third party and if that third party is doing their job correctly. Think about that. That is a big up yours. We're the government. They're a gigantic company. There is nothing you can do. Give us more of your money and shut the hell up. Fascism. Let's continue. Hall maintains that the $400 billion figure isn't an estimate of the fraud prevented, but rather what was actually stolen. He says his estimate that half of all claims paid out were fraudulent was reasonably extrapolated from a representative sample, namely what ID.me saw in the first 5 states where it went to work. He also argues that the data ID.me continues to gather confirms the estimate and that it has been validated by others, including experts at the Conservative Heritage Foundation, which was critical of the expanded unemployment benefits. So hold on. Just because the Heritage Foundation was critical, and this guy is saying off of 5 states, he's going to predict that half of the payments were fraudulent. This guy is a snake oil salesman. He is. He's a snake oil salesman. Because ID.me has a bunch of problems. All these hackers can get into everything. This isn't airtight. Governments always suck at doing this type of stuff. And I don't know. I don't trust this ID.me system. Again, I used it. It's sketchy as shit. But the fact that he is one of these megalomaniacs that wants to be everywhere you are at all times scares the shit out of me. And I can't believe anything this guy says. Continuing. But the math to get to $400 billion, in a way, depends on ignoring ID.me's apparent success in identifying and preventing potential fraud in places such as California, where officials early in the pandemic complained they were receiving claims from inmates in state jails. According to the state, California actually stopped $125 billion in fraudulent claims during the pandemic, or more than 6 times the $20 billion in fraud it succumbed to. That was partially thanks to ID.me and other contractors, such as Thomson Reuters and Accenture, and its success being celebrated. Quote, today, the UI, unemployment insurance, program fraud rates are lower than pre-pandemic levels, the California EDD said in December email. One quick thing, do you notice that they're saying during the pandemic, in the pandemic? The pandemic's over to everybody. The charade's being kept up by the major government players, the left especially, but the pandemic is over. Everyone sees it. We need to stop the shit with all the things that are going on with the vaccines and masking. Continuing. But even California's fraud numbers should come with an asterisk. Advocates for unemployment workers say ID.me's fraud case largely rests on the reliability of its own algorithms and seems to ignore the problems users have had. For example, between January 28th and March 8th, 2021, ID.me had 654,292 users start its verification process in California, according to the data Hall provided. Just half of those users completed ID.me's checks. Hall argues that any users who didn't complete the process were clearly scammers. That is such a funny way of going about it. If you can't do our steps the way we want it done, you're a scammer. What a logic. All right. Redacted confidential reports filed to officials by ID.me in California and obtained via Bloomberg open records request offer a more nuanced reading. On November 17, 2020, for example, ID.me reported that the prior week, 101,050 people in California attempted to verify their identities with ID.me. Of those, just 40% succeeded, so 60% scam rate. But you could see the frustrations unemployed workers and their advocates complain about playing out in the data. Almost a quarter of the people ID.me dealt with in California that week tried to get on a video call with the company rep, but only 10% of that group succeeded. More than 7,000 people also abandoned the ID.me process by either closing their browser midway through or having their session time out. Both situations are easily attributed to tech glitches as fraud. Cynthia Rice, Director of Litigation Advocacy and Training for California Rural Legal Assistance, warned state officials early in the September 2022 that she had serious concerns about the impact of ID.me on low-wage workers. More than a year later, Rice and her colleagues are still dealing with the fallout among their low-income clients. Farm laborers and other workers who were wrongly flagged for fraud by ID.me had benefits cut off, waiting months for appeal, all because an algorithm had made a decision. Quote, I mean, we're never going to let our criminal courts just convict somebody based off the fact that you've got a digital record or that they did or did not respond to something or that shows X, Y, and Z, Rice says, quote. But essentially, that's where we are with these fraud determinations. Now, she's speaking too quickly there, speaking way too quickly. These digital records are going to contain everything about us, Miss Rice. They're going to know everything about us the more we have to use it. If the states are on it already, and then the Fed's getting involved, how are you going to get away from this? It's going to know everything about us. So hell yeah, you're going to be able to sit there in courts and they're going to say, well, you know, according to where your login data was, you were not where you said you were. Don't think that this isn't going to happen. This is going to happen. They've used cell phone records to ping where people are and, you know, find out where this person is because this trigger went on. Don't think that this isn't going to happen with this thing, with ID.me, if it gets as big as they're wanting to get. This is not good. Continuing. The picture has been muddied further by how the fraud has evolved over time. ID.me's original purpose, its whole sales pitch, was as an impervious barrier to scams. But in the middle of last year, it was itself being used as a conduit for scams. In July, Erica Worthy clicked on a Facebook ad offering $2,000 a day to clean JetBlue planes in Chicago. She's an idiot, by the way. The unemployed Florida resident filled out an application and sued her from a JetBlue recruiter who directed her to a link. Quote, all you need to do is click on the link and take a selfie, he told her. Worthy was taken to an ID.me's website where she uploaded documents and scanned her face. Then she sat back and waited for the job offer. It never came. Worthy had just had her digital identity stolen by criminals who'd filed a claim with the California Unemployment Office using her name. When the California claim was identified as potentially fraudulent, her Florida unemployment papers were suspended. Each attempt to reach ID.me drew an automated response with a new 7-digit ticket number and then nothing else. Quote, I've sent so many requests to these people, Worthy says. I have so many ticket numbers. And after a week of calls, she finally got it resolved. According to Hall, ID.me does everything it can to prevent fraud. He describes incidents like Worthy's as garden variety phishing attacks of the type every business must contend with. Quote, this is not an attack that's unique to ID.me, end quote, he says. He's right that these attacks aren't unusual, but the consequences to ordinary citizens are. And on top of that, I have to say that if you're branding yourself as this revolutionary proprietary software that is bulletproof and is going to prevent fraud, then you cannot be subject to garden variety phishing attacks. I'm sorry, you need to be above this if you want this product to be as foolproof as you say it is. And again, time and time again, this article is good because it's ripping apart all the nonsense. It's attacking this while not completely coming out and saying it's complete bullshit, but it is attacking it and it's giving you a lot of good information. Let's continue. We have a little bit more of the article. Still a good amount to go, but let's continue with it. Because again, it is really important that we hear about this. The questions about ID.me matter more and more as it extends its reach into the lives of Americans. The unemployment crisis gave it critical mass. It now boasts more than 68 million users, or almost 1 in 4 adults in the United States, and it's adding people at a rate of 145,000 a day. It has contracts with big government players, including the Social Security Administration and the IRS. People, it's in the federal government. Fascism, it is here. Great Reset, it is here. ESG is coming for all of us. Social credit scores are coming for all of us. This is the way it's going to happen. Let's keep going. Hall says that after ID.me won an IRS contract last year for the Biden administration's enhanced child tax credit, he was able to mobilize on short notice. Quote, we had about 70 days, which isn't a lot, and we hired 1,400 people in Q2, and we solved it. But as the first monthly child tax credit payments went out into July, social media lit up again with complaints about ID.me. Quote, I called the IRS and they have no idea why I'm receiving this error or what it is, end quote. One frustrated user, Tactical Randy 1, posted on Reddit on July 17th. Quote, I have been swearing like a sailor over here. I'm so frustrated with this process. Another quote, replied another user. By November, ID.me was starting to address such complaints by adding an in-person verification option in New Jersey. Missing from its announcement was a sense of irony. It had just recreated an analog function that DMVs and banks have been performing for decades. Yes, we're so proprietary and so revolutionary. You could do everything online, but if you can't, you have to come in and see us. So what's the difference? What is now different about this? We're getting the same goddamn thing. Getting the same exact thing. It's insane. It's insane. Keep going here. And the investor money keeps pouring in. Last March, ID.me raised $100 million in funding from Viking Global Investors, SoftBank Group Chief Executive Officer Marcelo Clore, followed by an additional $100 million in debt from Fortress Investment Group LLC in September. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't look at any of these. I need to do my homework. I will be back next episode. I'm gonna look at these names. I'm gonna see who the hell they are and find out who they are, because that probably reaches back into more conspiratorial stuff that I don't have for us currently. Keep it on going. Which problems the government should tackle on its own and which are best left to the private sector has long been a subject of fierce debate in America. It's a partisan divide seen with President Biden's attempts to get a new social spending package through Congress. But when technology is involved, there's often more united belief that the marketplace is better equipped to deliver a solution, whether it's transporting supplies to the International Space Station or developing vaccines. That idea was reinforced with the Obama administration when it struggled to roll out effective insurance portals after the Affordable Care Act took effect in 2010. And then the following year with the National Institute of Standards and Technology Digital Identity Plan. Jeremy Grant, who oversaw that implementation, says when Obama ceded the task of policing digital identities to private sector, aware that anything resembling a national identity card would be a hard sell with conservatives, the thesis was that you could have an industry solve this for you. Let's go back there. This is where it started. It started under the Obama administration. They knew that they could subvert everybody if they just teamed up with a private company to do what they wanted in a public way with the government. So we know that making everybody have ID cards where all their shit is on it, and instead of saying paper please, they're going to say QR code please, which is what they do in Canada. QR code please. Let's see your box so I can scan it. But they knew that wasn't going to fly because conservatives are a little bit more happy with freedom and individual rights. But no. They don't want that. So the thesis, so let's see, let's read it again because they give away the game. Jeremy Grant, who oversaw that implementation, says when Obama ceded the task of policing digital identities to the private sector, aware that anything resembling a national identity card would be a hard sell on conservatives. Quote, the thesis was that you could have an industry solve this for you. Public-private partnership. Nazism, fascism, leftism. Nazism and fascism are left-wing movements. Continuing again. A decade later, though, Grant thinks Washington relinquished too much control to companies like ID.me. He now leads the Better Identity Coalition, which is composed largely of financial services firms such as JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, and Equifax. It's pushing legislation in Congress that would require a bigger government role in verifying digital identities for fear that for-profit contractors such as ID.me may come to dominate the function. Yeah, we're so worried about for-profit contractors that we're going to get JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, and Equifax involved. Two of them, which are two of the backing banks of the Fed. Two out of the big five, JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo, who also already both working on ESG scores internally for the financial sector. Again, ESG scores, environmental, social, corporate governance. If you're not down, if you're not helping the environment, if you're not looking green, if you are not bowing down to BLM, being woke, and you're also not sitting there with the social governance doing everything in lockstep with the government and agreeing with the government or speaking out against the government, you have a bad score. These are the companies that are starting to oversee it in the financial sector already. It's going to trickle down to people. This is how the social credit score started in China. Awesome. Let's be more like China. Biden already primed us for that one early, didn't he? Continuing. Representative Bill Foster, the Illinois Democrat who's the lead sponsor of the legislation, says verifying people's digital identities should be treated as a fundamental governmental responsibility. Of course he would, because to leftists, everything is a fundamental government responsibility. Continuing. It has consequences for everything from cybersecurity to central banks' ability to establish viable digital currencies. Foster also believes Americans ultimately won't accept having a private sector take on such a sensitive function. Quote, if the future is that you have to log in using Google or log in using your Apple ID, and that is the gatekeeper for asserting your digital identity, then that is not a future that most people in the US are comfortable with, end quote, he says. Newsflash, most people in the US aren't comfortable with any gatekeeper to get to our own shit. It's ours. Government shouldn't have a say in it. Private companies should never say in it unless we relinquish it to them willingly. But if they're working with the government, any of them, they're bad. Not a good thing. And neither are you, Mr. Bill Foster. No, it is not a fundamental government function to gatekeep what we can have of our own or not, how we can access it, and our identities being established through a freaking database. No. Continuing, there were also concerns that ID.me and companies like it could act as ideological tools used to limit access to government benefits. Quote, states are using these systems to make benefits harder to get, end quote, says Kevin DeLiban, director of advocacy at Legal Aid of Arkansas, which is suing the state to get information on how software from a company called Protect Solutions, Inc. is using there. Quote, if they want to say that their product is preventing fraud, they need an open public accountability, end quote. Others are just worried about what they see as profiteering. Quote, anytime you add an outsourcing component, even a technological component, to a government function, you have to ask who is benefiting financially from that, end quote, says Lorena Gonzalez, a California assemblywoman who's helped unemployed constituents struggling to get verified by ID.me. Quote, these are vendors, they make a lot of money, end quote. No shit, they make a lot of money in their vendors. No shit. That is you hear Miss Lorena Gonzalez, assemblywoman, that is the bourgeoisie proletariat argument hidden in there. Let's bang against the capitals. I don't trust ID.me either, but that's not my argument. It's not because they're making money. Of course, they're making money. That's the whole purpose of being in business, you moron. Continuing. Hall says ID.me actually lost money fighting fraud during the pandemic, but the company clearly knows it's emerging from the crisis with other baggage. In a January 14th interview, Hall said ID.me would soon release a report detailing its experiences with the unemployment system that would show it had seen things even the FBI couldn't. Quote, we were the first ones to have a bird's eye view, end quote. He said, quote, the truth is on our side, end quote. In early January, its public relation teams also began circulating a white paper defending the company's facial recognition technology and touting a no identity left behind initiative. He said they could see things the FBI couldn't. Now, the FBI sucks now. They're probably one of the worst police forces on the planet, and they're completely partial and completely political at this point. They're a leftist arm right now. But it is scary that they saw things that the supposed to be best police agency in the world couldn't. Either the FBI is dropping the ball and they suck, which wouldn't surprise me, or this is really bad shit that we shouldn't like. Last paragraph of the article, quote, as services and transactions increasingly move online and the economy becomes even more digital, we have an enduring obligation to ensure everyone has the opportunity to participate, end quote, the paper began. That's a laudable mission, one worthy of an indisputably patriotic CEO. It's just not one of ID.me's involuntary customers think the company has lived up to. All right. And this ends off with Jen Hake. I guess she helped write this as well. But let's go back to that quote right there. Quote, as services and transactions increasingly move online, the economy becomes even more digital. We have an enduring obligation to ensure everyone has the opportunity to participate. How is making it difficult to get your own tax returns and eventually be everywhere and get a hotel through your app, get anything through your app? How is making you the mega company ensuring people have an opportunity? They put in these bullshit words because they know it sounds flowery. But let me go back to the crux of this here. Because like I said, this is an all hands on deck kind of issue. The left doesn't like it. The right doesn't like it. The center, I don't know what the government likes it because the government's going to get a piece of their pie on this. But people don't like it all around. But let me say something here. This is exactly what you signed up for if you vote for the left. If you are a leftist, this is what you are signing up for. Digital surveillance, this type of shit. Eventually, this is what your ideology leads to. And all the people leading in your current party right now are all going this way. This is a product of how you vote and what it is. Everyone is okay with a nanny state. Everyone asks for this type of shit. If you're voting left, you're voting for bigger government. This is exactly what you're voting for. This is bigger government. Bigger government always leads to them running your life. Realize that. You're not voting to become Sweden. You're not voting to become the Netherlands. You're not voting to become Scandinavia. Not here, not with our leftist. This is not what you're voting for if you vote for the left. If you want this type of shit to go away, number one, we need to go against it more. Guarantee you're going to hear Blake Hall's name much more going forward. As he wants to expand and do all this stuff, you're going to hear him starting to partner with Facebook. You're going to hear him starting to partner with BlackRock, which I'm going to talk about in a second. You're going to hear him starting to partner with some of the major banks. There's banks against him now because they're the ones that want to be doing this. But you're going to hear that. You're going to start to hear ID.me more because we're going to have to all get one, unfortunately. And this is the start of the passports. And unless we start speaking out against it now and realizing it, this is the problem. Get off the vaccine passports now. Get off them now. The government knows they're not going to get that, but they are slipping in a digital passport anyway through this means. They are in 27 states already, so it means it's already at the state level. And now it's in the Fed level, Social Security, IRS. This is a problem. And they said their goal is to be everywhere to everyone. This is not something, they don't care about keeping us safe. They don't care about fraud. This is a power grab. And they want to be everywhere. Again, quote right here, Hall's pitch. You'll be able to do everything online from banking to accessing your health records and checking into a hotel room. They want to be your life. You know, we're worried about the metaverse. I'm worried about the metaverse. I'm scared of shit. Seen Ready Player One and Ready Player Two. I've seen enough sci-fi. Never works out well. But neither does this. There's so many different factions trying to gain power and gain control of us. And all it is pushing against the American ideal of individualism and private property. When you have to show, your barcode just to get into a hotel room, because I guarantee it's going to become, well, if you don't have your ID.me, we can't let you into those hotel rooms. I'm sorry. Your money's not good here. And they even said down somewhere with digital currency. So how are they going to try to slip this into crypto? Or if America goes digital with their currency, are you only going to be able to get your American digital currency through your ID.me app? Really scary shit, everybody. Really, really scary stuff. I'm going to link all 4 articles onto there. I'm going to link all 4 of them. But the main one I want you guys to read is the Bloomberg Businessweek one. I don't think I'm going to be able to have much more Bloomberg because a monthly limit of content is about to expire because all these places, all these news organizations kind of suck. They're so hard on money that their sponsors aren't good enough. They need you to pay for it all the time, which again, capitalism, go for it. But if I run out of expirations, I'm not going to read your articles anymore until I have more. I'm just a cheap bastard. But I'm going to link all 4 articles. Definitely read this Bloomberg one for yourself. I just read it all, but I would go over it again because it's scary as shit. Focus on the ESG type of stuff. There's a lot of nervous stuff here. They make, and I don't know if Bloomberg Businessweek is on this guy's side or not. They make him sound like a patriot. They make him sound like a guy whose heart's in the right place. I don't believe that. I don't believe his heart's in the right place at all, especially because he's a Harvard MBA. And the Ivy Leagues are swollen with leftist ideology, specifically Marxism and all this intersectionality bullshit. So I'm not convinced that he's a good guy. Not convinced that he's not on board with the type of leftist stuff that the current left wants. So it's a real push here. And this is something to be scared of, something to take note of, something to talk about. You might sound crazy at first. Show them these articles. Let them read it. From the left to the right, scared. But let me tell you this. The lefties on there, this is your fault. This type of shit's your fault. You're causing this by voting for this type of stuff. Because public-private partnerships is a leftist thing. It's a fascist thing. It's a socialist thing. It's exactly what they want because the government gets power through proxies saying that it's a private company, but the private company is doing their bidding. And now we're about to give this private government-esque company all of our information, whether we want to or not. So please fight against this. Spread this out. This is extremely important to talk about. Whether you send them to my podcast or not, just get this out there because this is not good. Not good at all. So again, I want to thank everyone for listening. I might not do this article. I'm looking at one here, a new article that was written on the 18th. BlackRock CEO on new world of work companies not adapting to do so at their own peril. Just a quick aside on this. BlackRock is the biggest money holder investor on the planet. They have like a few $1 trillion under their belt. It's bigger than most countries' GDPs. This guy, Larry Fink, is a dangerous human. And BlackRock is a company that is buying small towns, buying up small towns. Banks don't have them. They're buying them cash. What do you think they're going to do with these small towns? We're going to start owing we're not going to have mortgages. We're going to start owing money to these companies. Companies are going to give us mortgages now, not banks. Be wary. Read this article. It's from CNBC.com. I'll link this article as an extra article in the information there down underneath the podcast and everything. The BlackRock CEO, new world of work, companies not adapting, do so at their own peril. It's a threat here. It's a threat. Get on board with the ESG. Do what we say, or we're going to come after you, and we're going to end you because they also have the Biden administration's ear because there's a few BlackRock executives, former executives, that make up parts of his advisory, and I think even one of his cabinet members. So, yeah, another company working very closely with our government, public-private partnership. All right, everybody. Thank you for putting your tinfoil hat on with me. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening as always. Again, if you like what you hear here, if you like what I'm doing here every single day, at least 5 days a week, like, follow, share, subscribe, word of mouth, tell people. I try to bring you the important articles I think are important. I know reading them in full could be mundane sometimes, but I think it's worth it to hear it completely and have me opine on it on the side instead of just giving you a summary, because I think there's some things you miss when people only give you kind of summaries or snippets. I don't like taking things out of context if I don't have to. And reading the whole article gives you the whole context. If you want to find on social media, find me on social media, the show. Just search the Alex Cuesta Show wherever you are. I don't feel like giving you all the tags. That's tedious. Today is the 24th. I think I mentioned that. January 24th, 2022. I appreciate everybody for listening. As always, I look forward to coming back tomorrow with a new show, some new content. And it'll be fun as always. So again, everyone, thanks for listening all. Have a good night. See you tomorrow.